Well, it is great to see everyone this morning. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, and what better day to talk about the joy of marriage than the day after Valentine's Day? Now, when it comes to marriage, anyone who wants to be married or is married wants to have a joyful marriage. I mean, after all, who wouldn't want to have a joy-filled, fulfilling relationship with their spouse? But the thing about it is that a joyful marriage doesn't happen by accident. You know, society wants to paint this fairy tale picture that if you find the right person, everything's just going to fall into place and it's all going to be sunshine and roses. But that's not the case. Anyone who's been in a relationship knows that every relationship has problems. Every relationship has struggles. Every relationship has hurdles they need to overcome. And so having a joyful marriage takes skill to cultivate. You have to work at it. You have to learn communication skills. You have to learn romance skills. You have to learn conflict resolution skills. And a joyful marriage requires a willingness to put the other's needs first. You know, our world, again, tries to sell this idea of, well, put yourself first. Look out for number one. But the Bible paints a different image. The Bible shows us this image of putting the other person's needs first. And if the husband is putting his wife's needs first and the wife is putting the husband's needs first, then everyone's needs are taken care of. And so today, with this concept in mind, we are going to be talking about the joy of marriage. Now, this is what you might call a title sermon. The series is called The Joy of Marriage, and this sermon is also called The Joy of Marriage. We're going to be studying from Song of Solomon. Specifically, we're going to be studying Song of Solomon chapters 4, 7, and 8. And you might be wondering why kind of that random spread. Well, we studied chapter 1 through chapter 3, verse 5 last week. The rest of chapter 3 is the wedding processional and doesn't really teach us a lot of lessons. And next week, we'll be talking about chapters 5 and 6. So today, we're covering the rest of the chapters. And we're going to be learning some very beautiful lessons about marriage, about romance, and how to have a joyful marriage from those chapters. Now, as I said last week, and I want to say again, Song of Solomon isn't a book that we study a lot, because it definitely has sensual themes. And I want to assure you, everyone who's here and everyone who's watching online, I'm going to be keeping it situation appropriate. We're not going to be getting into anything that isn't appropriate for all ages. We will be talking about intimacy, but we'll be doing it in an appropriate way. So, with that being said, let's jump in and let's look at Song of Solomon chapter 4. Now, in Song of Solomon chapter 4, it starts out with Solomon expressing his love for his bride. Now, setting the scene, the end of chapter 3 has the wedding processional that has the bridegroom coming to the wedding feast. And this is probably taking place either at the wedding feast or just after the wedding feast. This is not yet the wedding night. And he says, "How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats that have descended from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes, which have come up from their washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them has lost her young. Your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your temples are like a slice of pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with rows of stones, on which are hung 1,000 shields, all the round shields of the mighty men. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies until the cool of the day. When the shadows flee away, I will go my way to the mountains of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense." Now, you can see the imagery. She's still wearing the wedding veil. She's still wearing her necklaces and all the finery of the wedding. And he compliments her. But he doesn't just say, "Hey, you're pretty." He starts at her head and works his way down, complimenting everything. And that's the first thing I want us to notice, that he compliments every part of her. He doesn't leave anything uncomplimented, as it were. And later on in the book, he does the same thing. and just compliments every part of her. He also uses word pictures to accentuate his compliments. Now, we talked some about word pictures last week, but word pictures are such a good tool for communicating emotion. And the word pictures he uses don't really hit today. I mean, men, if you went to your wife and said, your teeth are like a flock of sheep, she'd be like, what? But in that day, all the imagery that he uses hits the mark, makes sense in their culture. So finding word pictures to communicate your feelings and communicate your compliments can take those compliments really to the next level. He also doesn't fall back on cliches. And I don't know what a cultural cliche for his time would have been, but for our time, it might be something like, wow, you're hot. Okay, cool. Get more creative. Put more thought into it. So I have some lessons here for loving husbands. A loving husband expresses his love and devotion for his wife. Now, men, I know sometimes we get a little bit, less than poetic. Maybe you're not a poetic type. And there's that old saying that I think is ridiculous, but I've actually heard people say it, where they say, oh, well, I told her that I loved her on the day I married her, and if it changes, I'll let her know. Don't do that. Express your love and devotion for your wife. Tell her in flowery terms. Tell her often. He also, though, demonstrates his love and devotion for his wife. We see this throughout the book, that he's not just saying that he loves her, he's demonstrating to her that he loves her. Your words are important, but your actions are even more important. Also, a loving husband builds the skills to romance his wife. Now, whether or not you are naturally a romantic man, build the skills of romance. It doesn't come naturally to some people. Build those skills. It will help your relationship and make your wife feel special. So build those romance skills. That brings us to verse 7. Chapter 4, verse 7. He says, you are altogether beautiful, my darling, and there is no blemish in you. Honestly, this really is the perfect compliment. Now, objectively speaking, she probably does have blemishes. Anyone who's human has blemishes. None of us are perfect, and that includes this particular bride. But he's not lying. When he says you are perfect, you are without blemish, he's also not lying. What he's saying is that in his eyes, she is without blemish. And right there, that teaches us a really important fact about compliments. And that is that, well, husbands need to learn to give honest but effective compliments. Men, sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot because we might end up giving a compliment that compliments 3 or 4 things about her, but then there's one criticism. You know, this positive thing, that positive thing, but then there's this one thing that bugs me. And you know what? All that she's hearing is the negative. You could say 100 good things and tack on a negative, and all she's going to hear is a negative. So guys, use compliments. Learn to use effective compliments. Be truthful, but do so effectively. On the other side of the equation, wives, learn to take his compliments in the spirit they're given. And there's kind of 2 aspects to this I want to talk about for the moment. One, if he gives you a compliment, accept it. You know, there's this thing that some women do where they try to counteract or contradict. Oh, no, there's this problem. I've got this problem. I've got that problem. You know, I've got this blemish and that blemish. Don't do that. It's really discouraging to a husband when he goes out of his way to compliment his wife and she throws it under the rug. You may feel like you're not perfect. Yeah. You may not be perfect. You're human. But if he gives you a compliment, accept it and thank him for it. But also sometimes husbands, sometimes we stick our foot in our mouth. There have been plenty of times that I have tried to compliment my wife and ended up doing the opposite. And the gracious woman that she is takes what I intended to say instead of what I actually said. So When your husband puts his foot in his mouth, take the compliment in the spirit that it was given, not necessarily in whether or not he said the words correctly. And that brings us to an interesting phrase in verses 8 and 9. Let's read 8 and 9. He says, "Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. May you come with me from Lebanon, journey down from the summit of Amana, from the summit of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of leopards. You have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. You have made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eye, with a single strand of your necklace." Now, he uses this phrase, my sister, my bride. And in our culture, this doesn't make a lot of sense. This is not implying incest. He is not implying that they are actually siblings. This is conveying the idea of closeness. The idea is they're not just friends and they're not just lovers, although they are friends and they are lovers, but they're close as family. And we see this throughout the book. They refer to each other as my sister, my bride, or as she refers to him as my brother. It's not implying any incestuous relationship. But look at the context of, or the content of this verse. He says, "You have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. You have made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eyes, with a single strand of your necklace." We see here a loving husband gets excited about his wife. And men, this isn't just something that happens passively. As you've been married for more than, a couple years, okay, you may not see her and get butterflies in your stomach. But men, choose to be excited by your wife. Choose that you are going to be excited by her. Also, express how she makes you feel. A loving husband expresses how she makes him feel. Not just saying, "Hey, I think you're pretty." Not just saying, "Hey, I love you." But "You make my heart race." How does she make you feel? And again, thinking about how this is going to impact her. That is going to make her feel like $1 million. That, hey, when you look at me like that, oh, my heart just races. Also, on the other side of that, a loving wife knows the value of nonverbal communication. Now, women kind of naturally know how to use nonverbal communication. But a loving wife knows the value of using that well. And she uses nonverbal communication to excite her husband. We all know that look, not the look that means you're in trouble, but the other look. And a loving wife will use that to catch his attention, to excite him. And women, that makes us guys feel really good. Then in verses 10 and 11, he goes to the next step. Solomon expresses his appreciation for her love. Verses 10 and 11. "How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than all kinds of spices. Your lips, my bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garment is like the fragrance of Lebanon." Now you notice, he's already complimented her appearance. He's already complimented their kind of relationship together and how she makes him feel. Now he's expressing appreciation for her love for him. He recognizes her love for him. Now, that may seem kind of like an obvious thing, like, yeah, he recognizes it. But he also is enticed by her love for him. He's telling her, "I see the love you have for me, and it excites me. I love this." He's recognizing and communicating that he sees her emotion. Now we have this section, verses 12 through 15, about a garden locked. We read, "A garden locked is my sister, my bride. A rock garden locked, a spring sealed up. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, henna with nard plants, nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all the trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, along with all the finest spices. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, and streams flowing from Lebanon." Okay, what's he going on about here? Well, the garden represents her body. She is the garden. And the garden being locked represents her virginity, that she has not been opening her garden to everyone. She has kept it locked for her husband. And that right there is a hugely important aspect that our culture kind of misses. You see, a woman's body is a beautiful creation of God, and it needs to be respected as such. You know, a woman is not a piece of meat. She's not an object to be ogled at. She is an important creation of God and should be respected. And virginity is to be honored and protected. Our society has gotten to the point where it mocks the idea of virginity. If you're an adult who is a virgin, the world mocks you and says that you are some sort of problem. But the Bible paints a completely different picture, that a person who maintains their virginity is to be honored. That is a beautiful thing. And so young women today need to be especially proactive in protecting their own virginity. To maintain that, you're going to have to be going against culture. They're going to have to be going against what their peers are doing. And so they're going to have to be proactive. But also young men need to develop and maintain the highest moral standard so that men are not doing anything to compromise that purity. And it really does take a team effort, as it were, everyone being on the same page about this. But then, chapter 4, verse 16 through chapter 5, verse 1, the garden is unlocked. And this really is a poor chapter break. The chapter should break after chapter 5, verse 1. We read, she speaks first. Awake, O north wind, and come, wind of the south. Make my garden breathe out fragrance. Let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its choice fruits. And then he says, I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh along with my balsam. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. Eat, friends, drink and imbibe deeply, O lovers. So the garden is unlocked. The garden should only be unlocked within the bonds of marriage. This is after their wedding. This is their wedding night. That garden can now be unlocked and be holy. And within the bonds of marriage, sexual intimacy is righteous and holy. And we need to know that. We need to remember that. We need to teach that to our young people, that within the bonds of marriage, sexual intimacy is righteous and holy. God designed it to be enjoyed by that married couple. And also within marriage, sexual intimacy should be shared in joyously and often. It should be something that is a joyous occurrence. We see this in the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 7, where Paul tells them, don't hold back from each other. Don't deprive one another, but share in this often. Now that wraps up chapter 4. And as I said, we're going to cover chapter 5 and 6 next week. So let's move forward to Song of Solomon, chapter 7. Song of Solomon, chapter 7. Now, the first part of chapter 7, verses 1 through 9, Solomon is again expressing his delight in his bride. And it covers a lot of the same concepts we've already talked about, but this is after the wedding, and so it gets a little more explicit. We're not going to go through that section, but we are going to go to chapter 7, verse 10, where she says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. One short little verse, but there's honestly a lot that we can talk about from this one simple verse. We learn here that a loving wife vocalizes her feelings. She's saying, well, this is how she feels about her beloved. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. But you also notice that she boldly affirms her commitment to her husband, or commitment to her husband. But the wording here is interesting. She's not necessarily speaking to him. She's not saying, I am yours and you are mine. She says, I am my beloved's, and his desires for me. It appears that she's talking to the friends of the group, the chorus, as it were. She's boldly affirming her commitment for her husband to others. And that right there is another important aspect of a healthy marriage. Because so many people get into the bad habit of speaking negatively about their spouse to others and talking about the negative things, the mistakes of their spouse. And what ends up happening is as a person complains about their spouse, then there's going to be somebody else who catches their eye. And they complain to that person about their spouse. And pretty soon a spark of romance has started, and there's the budding seeds of an affair. And so this woman, she is boldly affirming her commitment to her husband to others. And she lets those others know that she is devoted to her husband. Now, there's sometimes this cultural norm in our culture of Christian people not showing public displays of affection. No PDA, right? And PDA makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But you know the benefits of public displays of affection is it lets everyone know this relationship is healthy. You know, you might notice that sometimes I'll walk up behind my wife and kiss her on the top of her head as she's talking to people, and I'll walk off. Or she'll come up and she'll give my arm a squeeze, and she'll maybe peck me on the cheek and walk off. And that lets everyone within sight know our relationship is good. There's no room for a third party to slip in and start to drive a wedge. And that sort of displaying to others, not just with our words, but with our actions, that we are committed to our spouse, can help keep that relationship strong and keep others from trying to cause a problem in that relationship. She also says this. She says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. His desire is for me, she says. See, we've already talked about how a loving husband vocalizes how he feels about his wife. But you notice what this is doing. He has affirmed and reaffirmed how he feels about her. She knows without a shadow of doubt how he feels about her. And guys, I know we can get kind of stoic sometimes. Maybe we don't know how to communicate our feelings very well. But communicating to your wife how you feel about her, how she makes you feel, bolsters her in amazing ways and shows her that you are committed. But he also shows her, he doesn't just tell her how he feels about her, he tells and shows her that he desires her. And so she sees the proof, she has the evidence. And he lets her know about his sexual needs. That term desire generally here conveys the idea of physical desire. So he's letting her know. Men, women aren't mind readers. You know, there's that statement that people make so often that really ought not be made. She should just know. She's not a mind reader. Tell her, communicate to her your desires. But he also desires more than just sex. We see throughout this book that they have fun together. They enjoy each other's company. And men, we need to desire more than just sex with our wife. Desire her time, her intellectual challenges, bounce ideas off her, grow together. We also learn some things about a loving wife here. A loving wife, well, she believes what he tells her about his love and desire for her. That's big. If he's communicating how he feels about you, that he loves you, he desires you, he cares for you, believe him. Again, there's that idea of people saying, well, oh, he doesn't really mean it, or he has to say that because he's, married and all these things. Well, that undercuts the compliments. Believe what he tells you. But also, she internalizes the positive things he says about her. And I know, someone who deals with like chronic depression, this concept may be almost anathema to them. But if he's telling you that he appreciates things about you, that he loves you, that he cares about you, don't go and tell yourself that he's lying. Don't undercut him. Believe what he tells you, internalize that. Let that become part of your view of yourself. It will build your confidence as well. Now in verses 11 through 13, we see this country getaway. We're going to read 10 through 13, and we read, I am my beloved, and his desire is for me. Now she speaks to the groom. Come, my beloved, let us go out into the country. Let us spend the night in the villages. Let us rise early and go to the vineyards. Let us see whether the vine has budded and its blooms have opened and whether the pomegranates have bloomed. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes have given forth fragrance, and over our door are all choice fruits, both new and old, which I have saved up for you, my beloved. So it appears that she has planned a getaway because she's the one inviting him to go on this getaway. She's proactive about planning one-on-one time together. And this was important, obviously, in their time, but it's also important in our time. You know, we get so busy with work and school and everything else that goes on. And you will often hear couples complain that we don't do anything romantic anymore. Well, be proactive about it. Women, go ahead and plan a getaway. Plan a date night or a romantic rendezvous with your husband. Be proactive about planning one-on-one time together. But we also see that they, as a couple, are proactive about having fun together. They're going together out to see the vineyards, to enjoy the countryside. It is very important for couples to spend time having fun together. You know, you get into the drudgery of day-to-day life, the daily grind, as it were. And it's really easy to forget about that idea of having fun with your spouse. But this person is not just your spouse. They are your life partner. Have fun with that. Enjoy that time. But notice what she says in verse 13. 13 is really interesting. The mandrakes have given forth fragrance, and over our doors are all choice fruits, both new and old, which I have saved up for you, my beloved. Now there's some innuendo and terminology here. We see here the loving wife, she saves herself for her husband. She says that she has saved up these choice fruits. And remember earlier we talked about the garden imagery. Well, she's saved up the fruit, both old and new, for her husband. And she's willing to initiate intimacy. Now, that's a very common complaint in marriage counseling, is that couples get to a point where the man is the only one initiating intimacy. And it's kind of cliche, but it's cliche because it happens. And here we see the idea of her initiating. Now, just from a psychological standpoint, man, that makes a guy feel good. When his wife is initiating intimacy, oh man, that is just puts him over the moon. But both parties should be initiating intimacy. It shouldn't be a one-sided thing. But she also puts thought into how to please him physically. She has put together this rendezvous. She's promising that when they're out in the vineyards, she's going to give him her love. She's saved up these choice fruits. She's putting thought into how to please him physically. She's not just a passive participant in the situation. So we learned some wonderful things about romance and marriage from chapter 7. And now we get to chapter 8. And again, we're not going to cover every verse in chapter 8. Honestly, chapter 8 is one of the hardest chapters in Song of Solomon to interpret because there's a lot of seemingly disconnected statements that seem to not really follow the flow. So we're not going to go through every verse, but we are going to look at a few important concepts. Look at verse 6. Song of Solomon 8, verse 6. She says, "Put me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol. It flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord." So she talks about the seal. In ancient times, the seal was a sign of identification and ownership. You're familiar with the idea of a signet ring that would be stamped into wax or clay to show that this was an official thing. There was also cylinder seals that would be rolled into soft clay to show that this particular person owns this or it's a form of identification. And she wants him to make a claim over her, declaring to all that she belongs to him and that he belongs to her, that they are belonging to one another. And this is a big message towards marital commitment. You see, spouses should be sealed up for each other. They belong to one another. They should not be opening to anyone else. And they belong to one another, heart and soul, body and soul. 1 Corinthians 7 communicates that idea of the husband doesn't have authority over his body, but the wife does. And the wife doesn't have authority over her body, but the husband does. It's a two-way street. They belong to one another. And the romantic love should be exclusive to one another, not having anyone else in that situation, in that equation. And then she says this. She says, for love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol. Let's talk for a minute about healthy jealousy. That's not something we talk about very often. See, it is natural and God designed that men be jealous for their wives and wives be jealous for their husbands. Godly jealousy in marriage means that both the husband and the wife want the love and affection of their mates solely and totally for themselves. They want that, they desire that attention to be exclusive, not shared with anybody else. And it's important to note that this is not speaking of sinful, abusive jealousy. This is not the jealousy of a husband who controls everything his wife does and doesn't let her have friends and doesn't let her go out and spend time with her friends. This is not the jealousy of an abusive woman who grills her husband every time he has a conversation with somebody. This is not speaking about sinful, abusive jealousy. What this is talking about is the same jealousy that God has for his people. And you think about how many times in both the Old and New Testament, God's relationship with his people is compared to a marriage. And he says that he is a jealous God. And he talks about how when they go to foreign gods, it is as though they are committing adultery on him. And he is jealous for their worship. Well, that same thing goes in a marriage. Husbands and wives should be exclusive to each other, and they should be jealous of that affection. And so spouses should jealously guard and fight for their marriage. It is worth putting in the effort. It's worth that sometimes there may be tense conversations. There may be times where the wife has to say, hey, look out for that woman. She's getting too close to you. Or the husband might say, hey, look out for that guy. He's showing way too much attention. That is healthy and worth fighting for. He then says this in verse 7. Many waters cannot quench love, nor will rivers overflow it. If a man were to give all the riches of his house for love, it would be utterly despised. You see, genuine godly love is worth more than treasure and can overcome any challenge that comes against it. Godly love is worth far more. It'd be better to, as it says in the Proverbs, be a pauper, be poor, but have love than to be rich and have contention. And that godly love, it can overcome any challenge. Now, someone might say, well, I see so many broken relationships. Well, godly love employs all those godly attributes the Bible talks about. Love, forgiveness, fidelity, faithfulness, gentleness, kindness. Sounds like I'm listing up through the Spirit here, right? Because in a godly marriage, when both parties are showing those characteristics, challenges will come. But then both of them are handling those challenges with love and kindness and compassion, gentleness, faithfulness, and the problems are overcome rather than the problems overcoming the couple. Now, there is far more we could talk about, and if you're around for my Devo this afternoon, we're going to cover more from this chapter. But today, as we've been talking about the joy of marriage, looking at Song of Solomon, chapters 4, 7, and 8, we've learned a lot of lessons about how to have a joyful marriage and how to maintain that joy in a marriage. My friends, a joyful marriage simply doesn't happen by accident. You're not going to accidentally have a joyful marriage. It takes skill, it takes effort Sometimes it's difficult. So I encourage you, cultivate the skills needed and be willing to put in the effort to have a joyful marriage. And that will mean that you end up having to change some habits. That will mean that you have to make compromises. That will mean that you need to build skills that you don't currently have. Even if you've been married for decades, there is still more that you can learn, more skills you can gain, more health that you can have in that marriage. And so I encourage you, put in the effort. It is very much worth it. And as kind of a sideline note on this, one of the elders, Bob Aspie, said a few months ago that when a couple is at the point of divorce is not the time they should start looking for help. You should start looking for help when those problems start to crop up and you can't immediately solve them. I encourage you, if in your marriage you have problems, little things that are causing friction or difficulties, and you can't overcome them yourselves, seek help. Go to the elders. We have 3 godly, experienced elders. Come talk to me. I'd be happy to help if I can. Seek help because your marriage is worth fighting for. And we would far prefer to help couples overcome the little things that are causing friction rather than having to try to figure out how to fix decades of long, deep problems. Seek out help and work on your marriage often and early. Now, with that all being said, today, if you have a need, this hasn't really been a call to repentance type of sermon, but if you have a need, if you need the prayers of the congregation, if you want to learn more about what it is to be a Christian or to be a member of the Lord's church, we want to be here for you. So if you have a need, whatever it may be, please let it be known as we're led in this invitation song.
Thank you for watching. For a deeper study of God's Word, contact us through our website in the description of this video. Lakes Region Church of Christ invites you and your family to Bible classes for all ages on Sunday morning, and join us for worship. We also offer other scheduled Bible classes. See you soon.